So perfect. It's a tween novel. It's really, I'd say, what, 10 to 13, 14?
9 to 13, depending,
When you started the book, was it for tweens, or did it evolve into that? Did you always know that's the market you were going to do?
Yeah, it was always that age, because the character, Lucy, is actually based on this girl who was sitting in the row in front of me at my brother's college graduation. I didn't talk to her at all. She was just sitting there with this older man, and I guess it was her grandfather, but she was just so spunky and enthusiastic and so happy, like everything was just so happy. Like, she was just so happy to be there, and I don't know, there was something about her that I thought, this is a character. And so I always, and plus, the middle school years just are very important to me. I moved in the 6th grade, and it was just a really hard time, and so I love to write about the middle school age.
And then, it's called My Life in Pink and Green, and there's makeup involved. But there's also a green angle, which is really important in today's society. Was that always in your concept when you wanted to write the book? And
it actually wasn't, because my main idea was just to have an independent pharmacy and then this spunky, optimistic girl who sort of worked there, helped out her family. And then I was just brainstorming ideas with my agent, and it sort of came out of a discussion, what would it be like if it had an environmental and then it just sort of fit with her personality to want to get involved in something. But it wasn't like in the original vision.
Oh, okay. Okay, Lee. You have both written and illustrated books, as well as just being, not just, I don't mean that in it, but as well as just illustrating, I'm using the wrong word. Are there different challenges with writing the entire book yourself versus doing the pictures?
I think it's easier when you write it, because then along the way, if you want to make some changes, you can, and you're not stepping on anyone's toes, whereas sometimes it gets a little tricky if you're illustrating an author's story and you find something that doesn't work. For instance, in Wilbur, originally the character grazed. They repeated the line, and off he went to graze. And as the character developed, I realized, he started to become more human, anthropomorphized, and I thought, he just doesn't go down on all fours and eat grass. Like, he can't do that. So I asked, very sensitively if the author might consider changing that, but if it's my story, then I can just change it. So I think it's easier.
And that's really a question for everyone that's illustrated, or you who worked with illustrators. What kind of collaboration, is it a lot of back and forth when there's writing and then another person doing the illustrations, or is it kind of when you write, you turn it over and hope for the best? How does that, each of you probably have different experiences. I'm very curious about the collaboration effort. Okay.
Well, the first thing is that it's usually through a middle person, with the editor or the art director. So the illustrator and the author pretty much never talk. Maybe after the book is over, they exchange emails. So if there is something that the author doesn't like, something the illustrator is doing, it goes through somebody else, and they break it to them. Or the illustrator gingerly wants them to stop making the sheep graze. He has to go through this thing. So it keeps people separate, because I think, for one, they want the illustrator to bring what the illustrator is going to bring to the work, and rather they're afraid maybe it'll get too nitpicky. So I've never had a problem with it. And for some things, I've had more contact with the author. For The Higher Power of Lucky, Susan Petrone had based it on a real town in the California desert that she knew about. So she said to me when I was still doing the sketches, all these photographs of this real place, which was great, because then I had the research I needed. And I didn't mind that at all, so that was my experience for it.
Coming from the author experience, how has it worked for you? Have you ever been totally shocked when you saw the pictures back? Or?
Well, it's funny, that thing of keeping the author and illustrator separate, I think the theory behind it from what a publisher will say is, you don't want the author to dominate the illustrator or the illustrator to dominate the author. But I have this secret belief that really it's because they're afraid that you're going to gang up on the design. There have been so many times when afterwards, with my first picture book, I met the illustrator after the book came out. It was called Pieces of Another World, and it was with a new small publisher. And, I liked her illustrations, but I felt like there were a lot of design decisions that I would have made differently. And we went down to a conference, and we drove down together. And the first hour or so in the car, we were very ginger with each other and careful. And then we had this breakthrough moment where we realized that we both would have done the same things differently if only this design head hadn't told her she had to do it a certain way, And so that was really interesting for me. I have this speaks to the belief that actually they're afraid that the author and illustrator will get together and do things they don't like.
Maybe self-control.
I just want to jump in real quick. When I adapted Michael's novel, he had never written comics before, and so he had written the strip that sort of it was literally a his book. So, and I hadn't done a lot of comics, but I'd done enough that I kind of had a sense of what needed to be done. So he sends me the script, and it really it didn't work. Like even just the way he wrote it. So it's sort of like, hi, Mr. Shimmy, you just want a Pulitzer. Moment where, but you know what, he was just awesome, and we just, I kind of approached my editor first, and being in comics versus being in sort of more the literary publishing is a little more laid back. There is a lot more collaboration, or sometimes. I mean, I've had all sort of possibilities, but in this particular instance, he gave, Michael was like, no, have him call me, we'll talk about it. We ended up chit-chatting about our favorite, comic book inkers and whatever for hours. So it was a lot of fun, but it could have gone horribly, horribly wrong. And then to kind of go back to Lee's point about, sometimes it is easier to make the change, but the other problem when you write and illustrate yourself is you have no one to blame. If you've written something, the second Frankie book deals with racing. It's like a Power Derby, but like in his mind, it's racing scene after racing scene, and there are all these crowds, and I'm like, who wrote this? Like I'm drawing like characters, like drawing cards, and I'm like, what was I thinking? And I can't, my editor tries to get in the middle of it, but there's nothing we can do about it. So it's definitely kind of can go both ways.